My name is Renee, a 32-year-old software developer from Boston who always believed family comes first. After Mom died, Dad and I became inseparable until he married Margaret and her daughter Amanda joined our family. When Dad fell on hard times, I paid $120,000 for Amanda's college education with his promise to repay me. Now, 6 years later, I need that money for my wedding to Jasmine. But Dad refused because he doesn't approve of the woman I love. Before I get into this heartbreaking betrayal, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever been let down by someone you trusted. Growing up in suburban Massachusetts, I enjoyed what most would consider a normal childhood. Our neighborhood had tree-lined streets, decent schools, and enough other kids around to make weekend pickup basketball games a regular occurrence. Mom and Dad created a stable, loving home where I never questioned my place or worth. Dad worked as an engineering project manager while Mom taught 3rd grade at the local elementary school. Weekends meant hiking trips, helping Dad with home improvement projects, or curling up with books Mom brought home. Life felt secure, predictable, and warm. Everything changed when I turned 10, and Mom was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer. The next 2 years became a blur of hospital visits, whispered adult conversations, and the gradual disappearance of the energetic, laughing woman who'd been at the center of our family. I watched helplessly as cancer transformed her into someone increasingly frail, though her spirit remained unbroken until the end. She died when I was 12, and the foundation of my world crumbled. Dad and I were left alone in a house that suddenly felt too big and too quiet. His grief manifested as long hours staring at nothing, forgetting meals, and sometimes breaking into tears when he thought I couldn't hear. My response was different. I threw myself into schoolwork, finding control and comfort in academic achievement. Math problems and science experiments offered certainty in a world that had become unpredictable. When report cards came home with straight, as Dad would momentarily emerge from his fog to express pride, our shared grief creating a unique bond between us. "You're so much like her," he'd say, smoothing my report card on the kitchen table. "She would be so proud of how you're handling everything." Those moments became my lifeline, brief connections with the only family I had left. For 3 years, we existed in this new reality, learning to function, despite the gaping absence in our lives. We developed routines, Dad cooking larger dinners on Sundays, so we'd have leftovers through midweek, me taking on more household responsibilities, both of us checking in with each other, even on the hardest days. It wasn't perfect, but we were healing together, united in our loss. Everything shifted again when Dad joined a grief support group at the suggestion of his sister, my Aunt Patricia. That's where he met Margaret, a widow whose husband had died in a construction accident the previous year. Margaret had a daughter named Amanda, 3 years younger than me. Their initial coffee meetings evolved into dinner dates, and within 6 months, Dad was smiling again in ways I hadn't seen since before Mom's illness. I was 15 when Dad sat me down at our kitchen table, nervously fidgeting with his coffee mug. "Renee, I want to talk to you about Margaret." He began, his voice steady but cautious. I already knew where this conversation was headed. I'd seen how he lit up when she called how he suddenly cared about ironing his shirts and getting haircuts regularly. "I've asked her to marry me," he continued, "and she said yes." I nodded slowly, processing emotions I couldn't fully name. Part relief that Dad had found happiness, part betrayal on Mom's behalf, part fear about my place in this new arrangement. "What does this mean for us?" I asked the question, carrying more weight than its simple words suggested. Dad reached across the table and squeezed my shoulder. "It means our family is growing. Margaret and Amanda will move in here. You'll have a sister." "Stepsister," I corrected automatically. "Family," Dad emphasized. "But nothing changes between us, buddy. You're still my son." 3 months later, Margaret and Amanda moved into our home. Margaret immediately redecorated, replacing furniture and changing the color schemes that Mom had carefully selected years before. Photos of Mom remained, but were gradually relocated to less prominent positions. I understood the psychological need for Margaret to make the space her own, but each change felt like erasing another trace of Mom's existence. Amanda arrived with the typical sullenness of a 12-year-old experiencing massive life changes. Initially quiet and withdrawn, she barely spoke to me during the first few weeks. I made efforts to welcome her offering, to show her around the neighborhood, and including her when my friends came over to play video games. These gestures were met with minimal enthusiasm, but I persisted out of loyalty to Dad, who seemed desperate for his new family to blend seamlessly. "Give her time," Dad would say. "This is all new for her too." As months passed, Amanda's personality emerged more clearly, and not in ways I found easy to appreciate. Margaret doted on her daughter, rarely enforcing rules or consequences. Amanda's room could remain a disaster zone, while I was still expected to maintain order in mine. She could speak dismissively to adults, while I was held to higher standards of respect. Most tellingly, her mediocre report cards were celebrated with dinners out, while my continued academic excellence became background noise expected rather than acknowledged. A particular family dinner when I was 17 stands out in my memory. I'd just been accepted to my school's competitive science and engineering program, an achievement my teachers had called exceptional. That same week, Amanda had managed to raise a failing English grade to a C-. "We should celebrate this weekend," Dad announced during dinner. "Amanda has worked really hard to bring up her English grade." Margaret beamed at her daughter. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart. I know how much you've struggled with that class." I waited for someone to mention my news as well, but the conversation continued revolving around Amanda's marginal improvement. Finally, I awkwardly cleared my throat. "I got accepted to the STEM honors program today," I said. "Only 12 students made it in." "That's great," Renee Dad replied, with a quick smile before turning back to Amanda. "So, what do you want to do to celebrate this weekend, Amanda?" "Your choice." That evening crystallized what had been gradually becoming apparent. The family dynamic had shifted. Dad, perhaps out of guilt for moving on after Mom, or perhaps from genuine recalibration of priorities, had centered his attention on his new family. Margaret encouraged this focus subtly, positioning herself and Amanda as needing more care and attention than I did. The message became increasingly clear. I was self-sufficient, capable, and therefore less in need of nurturing or celebration. Rather than fight a battle, I wasn't sure how to win. I doubled down on my strategy of academic excellence as escape route. College applications became my focus, with special attention to scholarships and financial aid that would provide maximum independence. When my MIT acceptance letter arrived, accompanied by a partial scholarship, the path forward clarified. Dad expressed genuine pride, one of the moments when I glimpsed the father I'd known before. But even that celebration was brief, before family attention returned to its usual focus. "You've always been so smart and driven," Dad said, hugging me. "Just like your mother." Those comparisons to Mom, once my greatest comfort, had become bittersweet. They felt like Dad's way of placing me in the past alongside her, while his present and future belonged to Margaret and Amanda. My years at MIT offered both challenge and liberation. The academic rigor pushed me harder than any high school coursework, forcing me to develop new study habits and time management skills. Simultaneously, being away from home allowed me to define myself beyond the complex family dynamic that had emerged. On campus, no one knew me as the kid whose mom died or the stepbrother. I was simply Renee, computer science major, with a talent for algorithm development and a dry sense of humor. Financial reality meant working alongside my studies. My partial scholarship covered tuition, but left living expenses largely to me. Dad had offered some assistance, but I'd seen the financial strain of maintaining a household for 4 people, especially with Margaret's spending habits. I took a position at the campus computer lab, working 20 hours weekly during the school year and full-time during summers. I also picked up freelance coding jobs whenever possible, building websites for local businesses and debugging programs for fellow students. The packed schedule meant less time for socializing, but that changed when I met Tyler during sophomore year. We were paired for a major project in our advanced data structures class, and his work ethic matched mine. Tyler came from a military family that had moved frequently, giving him a self-reliant perspective that resonated with me. After successfully completing our project with the highest grade in the class, we became inseparable. Tyler understood my drive without needing extensive explanation, and our friendship provided the brotherhood I'd never experienced. "You're the only person I know who works harder than me," Tyler commented one night, as we pulled an all-nighter finalizing code for a gaming application we'd developed. What are you running toward, or from? The question caught me off guard with its insight. Both, I guess. Running from feeling replaceable. Running toward never needing to depend on people who might decide I'm not their priority. Tyler nodded understanding, without needing elaboration. That shared moment of vulnerability cemented our friendship into something that felt like chosen family. Throughout college, my visits home became increasingly infrequent. The contrast between my campus life, where my efforts were recognized on their merits, and the family dynamic at home made each return somewhat jarring. Dad would always greet me with genuine affection, but within hours, the household would revert to its normal patterns, with Amanda's needs and activities taking precedence. Margaret's attitude toward me remained cordial, but distant, as though I were a friend of the family rather than a member. My graduation from MIT marked a significant milestone. I'd maintained a 3.9 GPA while working throughout my education, finishing with honors and several job offers. Tyler and his parents attended the ceremony, along with Dad, Margaret, and Amanda. While Dad beamed with pride during the proceedings, the celebration dinner afterward quickly shifted focus to Amanda's upcoming senior prom and college applications. Berkeley would be ideal, Margaret announced, but we're looking at several private universities with strong liberal arts programs. Amanda wants the full college experience. The statement carried no acknowledgement of the financial implications of such choices, nor recognition that I'd just completed my degree while working multiple jobs to minimize debt. The contrast between our educational approaches seemed lost on them. After graduation, I accepted a position with a leading tech company in Boston, working on their security software development team. The starting salary exceeded what I'd expected, and the company's reputation meant significant growth potential. I found an apartment in Cambridge that I could afford without roommates, a small luxury I'd promised myself after years of shared dormitory spaces. My first 2 years in the workforce brought rapid advancement. The work ethic I'd developed through necessity became my professional trademark, and my innovations in security protocol development earned attention from senior management. By 26, I'd been promoted twice, and had begun building a substantial savings account. I opened investment accounts and purchased my first new car. Practical choices, focused on long-term stability. During this period, my relationship with my family settled into a predictable pattern. Monthly dinners maintained minimal connection with conversation, typically centered on Amanda's college search and eventual decision to attend Briarwood College, an expensive private university known more for its picturesque campus and social scene than academic rigor. I kept updates about my own life brief, having learned that extensive sharing of my achievements or challenges typically received cursory acknowledgement before conversation returned to more familiar territory. Amanda's high school graduation fell during a particularly busy period at work, but I arranged to take time off to attend. The ceremony itself was standard, with Amanda receiving her diploma to enthusiastic cheers from Dad and Margaret. What struck me was the elaborate party that followed, a catered affair at our house with professionally printed invitations and custom decorations bearing Amanda's senior portrait and Briarwood College logo. "Isn't this wonderful, Dad's sister, my Aunt Patricia?" said as she found me standing alone by the dessert table. "Such a special celebration." "It is," I agreed, politely remembering my own graduation dinner at a mid-priced restaurant with just the immediate family. Aunt Patricia's expression softened as she studied me. "Your mother would be so proud of everything you've accomplished, Renee. She always knew you were exceptional." Her words cut through the ambient noise of the party, reaching a place in me that hadn't been acknowledged in years. My throat tightened unexpectedly. "Thanks, Aunt Patricia. That means a lot." "I mean it." She squeezed my arm. "And I'm not the only one who sees it. Your cousins follow your career updates on social media. We're all proud of you, even if some people are too distracted to express it properly." Her knowing glance toward where Dad stood with his arm around Margaret made clear who some people referred to. This validation from Mom's side of the family, recognition of both my achievements and the uneven attention in our blended family, provided unexpected comfort. I wasn't imagining the imbalance. Others saw it too. As Amanda's college preparations began in earnest, I maintained my focus on career advancement and financial security. Each promotion and bonus represented another step toward the independence I'd long prioritized. I purchased my first property, a modest but well-located condominium that represented both investment and sanctuary. Life had developed a satisfying rhythm of challenging work, meaningful friendships, and careful planning for the future. What I couldn't have planned for was how quickly everything would change. The family dinner started like any other. Margaret prepared her signature lasagna, while Amanda chatted enthusiastically about the sorority she hoped to join at Briarwood. Dad seemed unusually quiet, contributing to conversation with absent nods and forced smiles. I noticed his distraction, but assumed work stress, or perhaps an argument with Margaret earlier in the day. After dinner, as Margaret and Amanda cleared dishes, Dad leaned toward me. "Can we talk privately for a few minutes?" In my office. The serious tone immediately raised concerns. "Sure. Everything okay? Just need to discuss something. Come on." I followed him to his small home office, formerly Mom's crafting room, before Margaret's redecorating efforts transformed it. Dad closed the door behind us and gestured for me to sit while he settled heavily into his desk chair. He looked suddenly older, the lines around his eyes deeper than I'd noticed before. "I'm in trouble, Renee," he began, voice low, despite the closed door. "Financial trouble? Serious trouble." This wasn't entirely surprising. I'd noticed subtle signs. The delayed roof repair, Margaret's reduced shopping bags, references to cutting back that had peppered recent conversations. Still, the gravity in Dad's expression suggested something beyond ordinary budget tightening. "What kind of trouble?" Dad ran a hand over his face. "I invested heavily in a commercial development project last year. Office buildings in that new business park north of town. The developer had an excellent track record, the location seemed perfect, and the projected returns were substantial. Let me guess, it didn't pan out. The developer declared bankruptcy 3 months ago. Mismanagement? Possibly some fraud involved. The authorities are investigating, but that doesn't help investors like me. I've lost everything I put in, nearly $200,000. The figure shocked me. Jesus, Dad, that's a massive investment. I had no idea you had that kind of capital available. Dad's expression crumbled slightly. I didn't, not entirely. I took out a second mortgage on the house and liquidated most of my retirement accounts. Without discussing it with Margaret, I asked, knowing how unlikely that seemed, given their relationship dynamics. She knew about the investment, but not the full amount, he admitted. And she's not taking it well. Her spending hasn't helped matters. The credit card debt has been mounting for years, and I've been juggling accounts to keep everything afloat. The picture clarified. Dad's failed investment gamble, compounded by Margaret's spending habits, had created a perfect financial storm. But why was he sharing this with me now, after apparently keeping it hidden for months? "I'm sorry to hear this, Dad. What's your plan?" His eyes, so similar to my own, finally met mine directly. "That's why I needed to talk to you. Amanda's been accepted to Briarwood. Tuition deposit is due next week, and the first semester's fees shortly after, with my situation." His voice trailed off. The unspoken request hung between us. I waited, forcing him to actually articulate what he was asking. "I can't afford to send her to college right now," Dad finally continued. "The business will recover eventually. I have contracts lined up that will stabilize things in about a year. But right now, I'm barely keeping the house payments current." "And you want me to help with Amanda's college costs," I stated flatly. Dad nodded, relief visible at not having to explicitly ask. "Just temporarily. Once my business stabilizes, I'll pay back every penny with interest. I promise, Renee. I wouldn't ask if I had any other option." "What about student loans? Community college for 2 years, then transfer. Those are options many students take." Dad's expression tightened. "Margaret and Amanda have their hearts set on Briarwood. Amanda's been talking about it since sophomore year. All her friends are going to private universities. Community college would devastate her." I bit back my immediate response about priorities and financial reality. "What exactly are you asking for, Dad, and for how long?" "Tuition, room, and board at Briarwood run about $30,000 annually," he explained. 4 years, so $120,000 total. But I should be able to take over payments after the first year or two at most. The number staggered me. That amount represented years of careful saving, a significant portion of my investment portfolio, and would delay my own plans for buying a larger property and expanding my investments. That's a significant amount, Dad. I'd need to think about this. Of course, he nodded quickly. Take whatever time you need. But the deposit is due next Friday. A week. He was giving me a week to decide whether to commit to potentially 6 figures of financial support for Amanda's education. The sister who barely acknowledged my existence, except when she needed something. I'll think about it. I promised, standing to end the conversation. Dad rose as well, placing his hand on my shoulder. Thank you, Renee. I know it's a lot to ask, but family helps family. Your mother would be so proud of the man you've become. The invocation of Mom, his standard technique when wanting my compliance, felt particularly manipulative in this context. Still, I nodded and left his office mind already racing through calculations and consequences. That night, I called Tyler for perspective. He's asking you for how much. Tyler's disbelief carried clearly through the phone. $120,000 for Amanda's college. Claims he'll pay me back once his business recovers. And you're actually considering this? Tyler had met my family on several occasions and understood the dynamics at play. I don't know, I admitted. It's Dad. Despite everything, he was there for me after Mom died. We were a team for years, before Margaret and Amanda. I can't just turn my back when he needs help. But this isn't helping him with his mortgage or medical bills, Tyler pointed out. This is paying for your entitled stepsister to attend an expensive private college instead of making financially responsible choices. The blunt assessment matched my own thoughts, yet family obligation tugged at me. What would you do? If you're seriously considering this, get everything in writing. Tyler advised, his practical nature asserting itself. Formal loan agreement, repayment terms, interest rate, everything. Treat it like a business transaction, because that's what it is. Tyler's advice guided my decision-making process over the following days. I reviewed my finances, calculating what I could provide without completely derailing my own future plans. I drafted a loan agreement, specifying a 5% interest rate and repayment schedule beginning immediately after Amanda's graduation. The document included consequences for missed payments and required Dad's business as collateral. When I presented these terms to Dad 5 days later, his initial expression revealed surprise. Perhaps he'd expected a simple handshake agreement or even a gift. To his credit, he recovered quickly and reviewed the document carefully. This is very thorough, he commented, pen hovering over the signature line. It protects both of us, I explained. Makes the expectations clear from the beginning. Dad nodded slowly. I appreciate you doing this, Renee. I know it's a sacrifice, and I promise I'll honor every detail of this agreement. By Amanda's graduation, my business will be back on solid ground, and I'll repay everything. As he signed the document, tears glistened in his eyes. You're a good son. Better than I deserve sometimes. That vulnerability, rare from my stoic father, momentarily dissolved my reservations. Despite the complicated family dynamics, this man had been my hero throughout childhood. He taught me to ride a bike, helped with science fair projects, and held me through nights of tears after Mom died. Perhaps this sacrifice would rebalance our relationship, reminding him of our connection. The loan was arranged through a direct transfer to Briarwood College, with remaining funds for living expenses sent to a dedicated account for Amanda's use. The immediate impact on my finances was substantial. My home purchase plans delayed indefinitely, retirement contributions, reduced investment strategy, shifted to more conservative options to ensure liquidity if needed. What struck me most in the following weeks was Amanda's reaction, or rather, lack thereof. No thank you call, no acknowledgement of the sacrifice involved. When I saw her at the next family dinner, she mentioned Briarwood only in the context of her excitement about dorm assignments and orientation activities. Dad watched me carefully during these conversations, occasionally offering comments like Renee's helping with your college expenses while my business recovers, attempts at prompting gratitude that Amanda skillfully ignored. As I drove home that night, I wondered if I'd made a tremendous mistake. But the agreement was signed, the money transferred. Amanda would attend her dream college, and Dad had promised repayment. All I could do was move forward and hope that family loyalty would ultimately prove well placed. Throughout Amanda's 4 years at Briarwood College, I received regular updates on her experiences, though rarely from Amanda herself. Instead, Dad and Margaret proudly shared stories during monthly family dinners, painting a picture of collegiate life that seemed to involve more social activities than academic pursuits. Amanda's been elected social chair of her sorority, Margaret announced during our dinner in Amanda's sophomore year. They organize all the mixers with fraternities and charity events. It's a very important leadership position. I nodded politely while cutting my chicken. That's great. How are her classes going? A brief flicker of something, annoyance, concern, crossed Margaret's face before she smiled. Oh, she's managing. College is about more than just grades, you know. It's about developing social connections and learning to navigate different environments. Dad jumped in quickly. She's doing fine academically. Had some trouble with her economics requirement, but found a study group that's helping. The pattern was consistent. Academic struggles were minimized while social achievements received elaborate attention. Amanda changed her major 3 times. From communications to business administration to finally settling on liberal studies, a broadly defined program that seemed designed to accommodate students without clear career directions. During her infrequent appearances at family gatherings, Amanda spoke enthusiastically about spring break trips to Cancun and weekend music festivals, but became vague when asked about coursework or career plans. My carefully worded questions about her academic progress were usually deflected or answered with rehearsed phrases about finding herself and exploring options. What bothered me wasn't that Amanda enjoyed the social aspects of college. Many students do, but rather the complete disconnect between her casual attitude and the significant financial sacrifice enabling her education. Each semester payment that left my account represented months of careful saving and delayed personal goals. Meanwhile, Amanda's social media showed her at expensive restaurants, wearing designer clothes, and taking vacations that seemed inconsistent with a college student's budget. Where is all this extra money coming from? I finally asked Dad directly after seeing photos of Amanda's spring break trip to the Bahamas. The funds I'm providing cover tuition, room, and board, and reasonable expenses. But she's living like there's an unlimited budget. Dad shifted uncomfortably. Margaret sends her some spending money from her teaching salary, and Amanda has a part-time job at a boutique near campus. The explanation seemed insufficient given the lifestyle displayed, but pressing further would only create tension. I let the matter drop, reminding myself that my agreement was with Dad, not Amanda. Her spending habits, while irritating, weren't technically my concern, as long as Dad fulfilled his repayment commitment. Family dynamics continued their predictable pattern throughout these years. My professional achievements, a major promotion to senior developer recognition with a prestigious industry award, publication of research papers, received perfunctory acknowledgement before conversation invariably returned to Amanda's sorority events or Margaret's school activities. I stopped sharing significant news after a while. The effort of introducing topics that would be quickly abandoned hardly seemed worthwhile. Amanda's graduation ceremony arrived in May, 4 years after our financial agreement began. I attended out of familial obligation, sitting with Dad and Margaret as Amanda received her diploma in liberal studies. The celebration afterward focused entirely on Amanda's accomplishment, with no mention of how it had been financed or the expected shift in financial responsibility that was supposed to occur. I waited a week after graduation before broaching the subject with Dad. Our loan agreement specified that repayment would begin the month following Amanda's completion of college, with monthly installments of $2,500 for 4 years to cover the principal plus accumulated interest. So, Amanda's officially a college graduate, I began during a phone call. Congratulations again to everyone. Thanks, Renee. We're so proud of her. She's taking the summer to travel before starting her job search in earnest. Margaret's brother offered her his timeshare in Hawaii for a couple weeks as a graduation gift. Another vacation. I suppressed a sigh. That sounds great. Listen, I wanted to touch base about our agreement. The first payment should be coming up next month, according to the terms we set. A brief silence followed. Right, of course. About that, things are still a bit tight with the business. That major contract I was counting on has been delayed by zoning issues. Could we push the start date back a few months? Just until fall. This wasn't entirely surprising, though. Disappointing. I can be flexible about the start date, but we should adjust the interest calculations accordingly. Absolutely, Dad agreed quickly. By September, things should be much more stable. I appreciate your understanding, Renee. September came and went, without payment or communication about the loan. When I called in early October, Dad apologized profusely, citing unexpected business expenses and promising to start payments in November. November's excuse involved medical bills from Margaret's minor surgery. December brought holiday financial strain as justification. The pattern continued for nearly a year, each month bringing a new reason why repayment needed to be delayed just a little longer. I began to understand that the promised repayment might never materialize, but confronting this reality meant acknowledging painful truths about my family relationships that I wasn't yet ready to face. During this period, a significant new development entered my life, Jasmine Williams. We met at a small coffee shop near my office, where she was conducting research interviews for her work in medical research. Jasmine specialized in clinical trial development for treatments targeting autoimmune disorders, work she'd been drawn to after her mother's struggles with lupus. Our initial conversation began when the cafe became crowded, and she asked to share my table. What started as polite small talk evolved into a 2-hour discussion ranging from healthcare accessibility to favorite hiking trails. Jasmine possessed both brilliant analytical skills and genuine warmth, a combination I found immediately attractive. Her perspective as the daughter of Nigerian immigrants who'd built successful medical careers in America informed her ambitious work ethic and strong family values. I believe we owe it to those who sacrificed for us to make the most of our opportunities, she told me during our third date. My parents left everyone and everything they knew to create possibilities for their children. The least I can do is work towards something meaningful. This philosophy resonated deeply with me, reminding me of Mom's emphasis on education and personal responsibility. Jasmine and I shared core values, despite our different backgrounds, and our relationship developed with surprising ease and depth. For the first time, I found myself sharing the full complexity of my family situation, including the loan arrangement and ongoing repayment issues. That's a remarkable sacrifice you made, Jasmine observed. But I'm concerned your father doesn't recognize it as such. Her insight cut to the heart of my growing unease. I think he sees it as something I owed the family, rather than a significant choice I made to help them. And what does your stepsister say about all this? Amanda has never acknowledged it directly, I admitted. I'm not even sure she knows the full extent of the arrangement. Jasmine's expression reflected gentle concern. That seems problematic. Family support should include appreciation, not entitlement. When I finally introduced Jasmine to my family, 6 months into our relationship, the dynamics were immediately uncomfortable. Margaret's greeting was cordial, but cold her questions about Jasmine's family and background carrying subtle undertones that made me increasingly tense. Dad made efforts at warmth, but seemed unsure how to navigate Margaret's obvious disapproval. Amanda, home between her various trips and temporary jobs, made little attempt to hide her disinterest in getting to know Jasmine. Your family seems protective of you, Jasmine observed diplomatically on our drive home. That's a generous interpretation, I sighed. I think it's more that you represent a part of my life they don't control or take center stage in. More troubling was Margaret's comment as we were leaving. While Dad helped Jasmine with her coat, Margaret pulled me aside with a tight smile. She seems very ambitious, she said the word, carrying unmistakable criticism, and rather different from our family. Don't you think I wonder if you've considered cultural compatibility for the long term? The thinly veiled racism in her comment left me speechless momentarily. Jasmine and I share the same values and goals, Margaret. That's the compatibility that matters. Margaret patted my arm condescendingly. Of course, dear, you know best. As our relationship deepened over the following year, Jasmine was unfailingly supportive but honest in her observations about my family dynamics. Her own close-knit family, parents who celebrated each child's achievements equally, and siblings who genuinely championed each other's success, provided stark contrast to what I'd grown to accept as normal. Gradually, her perspective helped me recognize patterns I'd normalized over years of subtle conditioning. You deserve recognition and appreciation, she told me one evening after I'd mentioned another missed repayment deadline from Dad. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, It's necessary for healthy relationships. Her words planted seeds that would eventually grow into the strength needed for the confrontation to come. After 2 years together, I knew without doubt that Jasmine was the person I wanted to build a life with. Her brilliant mind challenged me intellectually. Her compassionate heart opened me to greater emotional awareness, and her unwavering integrity inspired me to examine my own choices more carefully. We developed a partnership based on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine enjoyment of each other's company. My proposal wasn't elaborate, but reflected our relationship. During a weekend hiking trip to the White Mountains, our favorite escape from city life, I asked Jasmine to marry me at sunrise from a lookout point overlooking the valley. The ring I'd selected featured her birthstone, rather than a traditional diamond, honoring a comment she'd once made about preferring meaningful connections to conventional symbols. "I want to build a life with you," I told her, as morning light illuminated her surprised expression. One based on honesty, mutual support, and the understanding that we're choosing each other every day. Jasmine's yes was immediate and certain. We spent that day discussing our shared vision, careers that contributed meaningfully to the world. Eventually, children raised with values from both our cultural backgrounds and a home that would welcome friends and family with warmth, missing from my own upbringing. Financial priorities aligned naturally, maintaining reasonable work-life balance, saving for future security, and allocating resources to experiences rather than status symbols. Wedding planning began with practical discussions about budget and scale. Neither of us wanted an elaborate event, preferring something meaningful and moderately sized. The significant development came when Jasmine mentioned her grandmother in Puerto Rico. "Abuela Teresa is 86, Jasmine explained. "Travel is difficult for her now, but she's been so important in my life. Having her at our wedding would mean everything." "What if we brought the wedding to her?" I suggested. A destination wedding in Puerto Rico could be beautiful and more meaningful than a conventional venue here. The idea quickly took hold. Puerto Rico offered stunning locations at more reasonable prices than Boston venues and would allow Jasmine's grandmother to participate fully. We researched options and found a small beachfront property that could host both ceremony and reception with nearby accommodations for guests. The location would limit attendance naturally to close friends and family, creating the intimate celebration we both wanted. As we calculated costs, however, reality set in. Even a modest destination wedding required significant funds. Flights, accommodations, venue catering, and other essentials added up quickly. Our careful budgeting showed a shortfall of approximately $30,000. "We could postpone for another year to save more," Jasmine suggested, "or scale back further." The solution seemed obvious to me. After 3 years of excuses and delays, it was time to firmly request repayment of at least part of the loan from Dad. Even a portion of what was owed would cover the wedding expenses completely. "I think it's time my father fulfilled his promise," I told Jasmine. "He owes me over $120,000. Even a quarter of that would handle everything comfortably." Jasmine looked concerned. "Are you sure money and family can be complicated?" "It's not complicated. We had a written agreement. He promised to repay me after Amanda graduated, and that was 3 years ago. I've been patient, but this is important." After consideration, Jasmine nodded. "If you're comfortable with it, then yes. Just be prepared for potential pushback." I called Dad the next day, asking to meet privately to discuss an important matter. His immediate response, "Is everything okay?" carried the assumption that I only needed private conversations for problems. This subtle indication of how our relationship had evolved didn't escape my notice. "Everything's fine," I assured him. "Jasmine and I are planning our wedding, and I need to discuss something related to that with you." After some back and forth, we arranged to meet at a restaurant halfway between our homes the following weekend. Dad arrived, looking slightly harried, checking his watch as he sat down. "Margaret's expecting me back for dinner with her sister and brother-in-law," he explained. "But we have time." "What's up, son?" I took a deep breath, centering myself. Jasmine and I are planning our wedding for next spring in Puerto Rico. It's important to us because her grandmother can't travel to Boston, and she means a lot to Jasmine. Dad nodded, though his expression suggested limited interest. "Puerto Rico, huh? Bit unconventional." "It's meaningful to Jasmine, and therefore to me," I replied firmly. "The thing is, Dad, we've calculated the costs, and we're coming up short by about $30,000. A flicker of understanding crossed his face, followed immediately by discomfort. "I see. I wouldn't ask, except that you've owed me over $120,000 for 3 years now. According to our agreement with interest, the amount is closer to $150,000 at this point. I'm only asking for a fraction of what's owed." Dad shifted in his seat, avoiding eye contact. "Renee, you know things have been tight with the business. This economy isn't doing anyone any favors. I understand that, which is why I haven't pushed the issue. But this is important. We're not asking for the full amount, just enough to help with our wedding." Dad took a long drink of water, clearly stalling. When he finally spoke, his words hit me like a physical blow. "I don't think I can support this wedding financially, Renee." The phrasing caught me off guard. This isn't about supporting our wedding. This is about repaying a loan, a significant loan that you promised to repay years ago. Dad's expression hardened slightly. "To be honest, I'm not sure this wedding is something I can get behind anyway. You and Jasmine seem very different. Different backgrounds, different values." The implication hung between us ugly and undeniable. "Different how exactly?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Dad had the grace to look slightly ashamed, but continued anyway. "You know what I mean. Cultural differences can create real challenges in a marriage. Margaret and I are concerned you might be rushing into this without considering long-term compatibility." "Jasmine and I have been together for 2 years," I countered. "We've discussed every aspect of our future together. We share the same core values and goals. The only difference you seem concerned about is her race." "That's not fair," Dad protested, though weakly. "We just want what's best for you." "What's best for me is a partner who respects me, supports my goals, and treats me as a priority. Jasmine does all of that. But this conversation isn't even about your approval of my relationship. It's about a financial obligation you've ignored for years." Dad's expression shifted to something I hadn't seen before, a dismissiveness that suggested I was being unreasonable. "Look, Renee, that money was for family. Amanda is family. Your college education was family. This destination wedding to someone we barely know, that's different." The statement crystallized what had been implicit for years. In Dad's hierarchy, I existed on the periphery of family. Connected but not central. Included but not prioritized. Amanda was family in ways I apparently was not. And by extension, my future wife was even further removed from deserving consideration. "So you never intended to repay me," I stated, realization dawning fully. "You considered it my obligation to pay for Amanda's education because family. But my own needs don't qualify for the same consideration." Dad had the decency to look uncomfortable. "That's not exactly what I meant. It's just that right now, with finances tight—" "Stop." I held up my hand. "Just stop. We had a written agreement. You signed it. It wasn't a gift. It was a loan with specific repayment terms that you've ignored for years. And now you're telling me not only that you won't repay what's owed, but that you don't approve of my fiancée, based on nothing but prejudice. You're overreacting." Dad attempted his tone conciliatory but condescending. "No one's saying anything about prejudice. We just think you might be making a hasty decision. I'm 32 years old. I've built a successful career, maintained financial responsibility, and found someone who makes me happy. There's nothing hasty about any of my decisions." I stood up, unable to continue the conversation. "I think we're done here." "Renee, come on. Sit down. We can discuss this reasonably." "There's nothing reasonable about this situation," I replied. "You've made your priorities crystal clear. I won't forget it." I walked out of the restaurant, hands shaking with a mixture of anger and profound hurt. The father who had once been my hero, my remaining parent after Mom's death, had just confirmed what I'd suspected for years. In his reconfigured life, I had become an afterthought. And now when I needed him, he not only refused to honor his financial commitment, but revealed prejudice toward the woman I loved. The drive home passed in a blur of painful clarity, as years of subtle dismissals and overlooked achievements crystallized into an undeniable pattern. By the time I reached my apartment, Grief had transformed into a cold, clear understanding. I could no longer count on the family I was born into. The family I was building with Jasmine would need to be my priority now. I sat in my parked car outside my apartment building for nearly an hour, too overwhelmed to move. Eventually, I called Jasmine. "It didn't go well," I said, when she answered, my voice rough with emotion. "Where are you now?" she asked, concern evident. "Outside our apartment." "I'll come down." Minutes later, Jasmine slipped into the passenger seat beside me. She didn't press for details, just took my hand and waited. When I finally shared the conversation with Dad, his refusal, his thinly veiled prejudice, his dismissal of our relationship, her expression reflected pain, but not surprise. "I'm so sorry, Renee," she said simply. "You deserved better from him." The validation in those simple words released something in me. I'd spent years making excuses for Dad's behavior, justifying the imbalanced family dynamic, and accepting my peripheral position. Jasmine's straightforward acknowledgement that the situation was wrong, that I deserved better, broke through defenses I hadn't realized I'd built. "I don't know what to do now," I admitted. "The money would have made our wedding plans possible, but it's not even about that anymore. It's about realizing my father doesn't respect me or my choices." "We'll figure out the wedding," Jasmine assured me. "Maybe we scale back, maybe we wait longer to save. That part is solvable. The harder question is what relationship you want with your father moving forward." That question haunted me through a mostly sleepless night and into the next days. The following morning, I called Tyler, needing perspective from someone who understood the full history. "That absolute bastard," was Tyler's immediate response. "After hearing what had happened, after everything you've done for them, and to bring race into it, unbelievable." "What would you do?" I asked, the same question I'd posed when initially considering the loan. "Honestly, I'd take legal action," Tyler replied, without hesitation. "You have a signed agreement. His excuses don't change the legal obligation." The thought had crossed my mind, but initiating legal proceedings against my own father felt like a line I wasn't quite ready to cross. "I don't know if I can do that." "Then, what's your alternative?" "Write off $150,000 and pretend it never happened. Let him get away with both the financial betrayal and the disrespect to Jasmine." Tyler's blunt questions forced me to confront the reality of my options. Doing nothing meant accepting both the financial loss and the underlying message about my place in the family. Taking action meant potential permanent damage to an already fragile relationship. Over the following days, my phone filled with messages from family members. Dad's texts alternated between defensive justification, "You know how tight things have been," and attempts to minimize what had happened. "I think you misunderstood what I was trying to say about cultural differences." Margaret sent a single message expressing disappointment in my dramatic exit and suggesting I consider family harmony before making demands. Most stunning was Amanda's text, apparently having been informed of the situation from her parents' perspective. "Can't believe you're being so selfish about money, right when Mom and Dad are finally getting back on their feet. Dad helped you through college too, you know. Some things are just what family does for each other, without keeping score." The irony of Amanda, who had never once thanked me for financing her education, accusing me of selfishness, was almost laughable. Her message revealed how thoroughly Dad and Margaret had rewritten the narrative, positioning my request for loan repayment as unreasonable, rather than acknowledging their broken commitment. Not all family reactions were negative. My mother's sister, Aunt Patricia, called after apparently hearing about the conflict. "Your mother would be absolutely livid about this," she stated firmly. "Frank has lost his way since she died, and that woman has encouraged his worst instincts. You were right to stand your ground." Her unwavering support provided unexpected comfort. "I don't know where to go from here, Aunt Patricia. I can't pretend this didn't happen, but taking legal action against my own father." "No one can tell you what's right in this situation," she replied gently. "But I will say this. Setting boundaries with family isn't betrayal. Sometimes it's the only way to preserve what matters." The wisdom in her words resonated deeply. That evening, while organizing some old files, I came across a small journal that had belonged to Mom. I'd kept it among my important documents, though I rarely looked at it. Opening it randomly, a passage caught my eye. "Teaching Renee to stand up for himself, is one of my most important jobs as his mother. My gentle boy wants everyone to be happy sometimes, at his own expense. He needs to learn that self-respect isn't selfish. It's necessary. Standing firm about what's right, even when it's difficult, is how we show love for ourselves and others. Mom's words, written when I was still a child, seemed to speak directly to my current dilemma. She had known even then that this would be my struggle, balancing family harmony with self-respect. The insight from years past provided unexpected clarity. Mom would have wanted me to stand firm, not out of anger or revenge, but from a place of self-respect and principle. After several days of careful consideration and discussions with both Jasmine and Tyler, I drafted a formal letter to my father. The tone was businesslike, rather than emotional, referencing the specific terms of our agreement and documenting the history of delayed repayment. I included copies of the original signed document and a payment schedule, offering options if he needed to make smaller installments over a longer period. The final paragraph read, "This matter is now strictly business rather than family sentiment. I expect acknowledgement of this communication and your repayment plan within 2 weeks. If no response is received, I will have no choice but to pursue other avenues to resolve this financial obligation." I sent the letter via certified mail, ensuring Dad would have to sign for it personally. Then, with nothing to do but wait, Jasmine and I turned our attention back to wedding planning. We adjusted our budget, exploring options that would still allow us to marry in Puerto Rico near her grandmother, but with a smaller guest list and simplified arrangements. The process helped refocus our energy on our future together, rather than the painful family situation. 2 weeks passed with no response from Dad. The certified mail receipt confirmed he'd received the letter 3 days after I sent it. The silence spoke volumes about his intention, or lack thereof, to address the situation. I found myself at another decision point: follow through with legal action or accept the financial loss as the price of separating from a damaging family dynamic. The answer came from an unexpected source. 18 days after sending the letter, a knock at my apartment door revealed Dad standing in the hallway. He looked older than he had at the restaurant shoulders, slightly hunched eyes carrying the weight of someone who hadn't been sleeping well. "Can I come in?" he asked, voice lacking its usual confidence. I hesitated before stepping aside. "Jasmine isn't home," I said, making clear her absence wasn't an invitation for more prejudiced comments. "I came to talk to you," Dad clarified, entering cautiously, as though unsure of his welcome in my space. We settled in the living room, the silence stretching uncomfortably before Dad finally spoke. "I received your letter. And yet you didn't respond within the time frame requested," I pointed out. Dad nodded slowly. "I needed time to process everything, and to have some difficult conversations at home." The statement surprised me. I'd expected more excuses, or perhaps anger, at the implied legal threat. "And?" "You're right," Dad said simply, "about all of it. The loan, the agreement, the repayment that's years overdue, and about how you've been treated in our family." The admission, delivered without qualification, momentarily left me speechless. "What I said about Jasmine was inexcusable," he continued. "It came from a place of, I don't even know. Fear, maybe. Old prejudices I thought I didn't have. Margaret's influence, though, that's no excuse. I'm deeply ashamed of it." His apparent sincerity made it difficult to maintain the emotional distance I'd carefully constructed over the previous weeks. Still, years of disappointment had taught me to be cautious. "Why the change of heart?" I asked. 2 weeks ago, you were quite clear about your position." Dad's gaze dropped to his hands, now clasped tightly in his lap. "After you left the restaurant, I was angry, felt justified in my position. Went home and told Margaret and Amanda about your unreasonable demands and dramatic exit." He paused, seeming to struggle with the next part. "They responded exactly as I expected, supporting my position, criticizing you. But hearing them say out loud the things I'd been thinking, it suddenly sounded different. Wrong. I started questioning my own narrative." Dad glanced up, meeting my eyes directly. "Then your letter arrived. So formally written, like you were addressing a business associate rather than your father. It hit me how far things had deteriorated between us. That night, I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about our relationship over the years, especially since Margaret and Amanda came into our lives. He stood suddenly walking to the bookshelf where I displayed a few family photos. His attention fixed on one of Mom holding me at about age 6, both of us laughing at something off camera. "When did this start going wrong?" he asked quietly, more to himself than to me. "When did I stop seeing you clearly?" The vulnerability in his question penetrated some of my defensive armor. "I think it was gradual. After you married Margaret, priorities shifted. That's natural to some extent. You were building a new life. But somewhere along the way, I became peripheral." Dad turned back to me, pain evident in his expression. "After your mother died, I was so lost. The grief was overwhelming. When I met Margaret, she offered structure, certainty. Amanda needed a father figure, which gave me purpose again. It was easier in some ways than our relationship." "Easier?" How, I asked, genuinely wanting to understand. "You were so much like your mother. Thoughtful, self-sufficient, perceptive. Being with you meant confronting both my grief over losing her and my inadequacy in raising you alone. You were achieving so much despite everything, while I was barely functioning." His voice cracked slightly. "With Amanda and Margaret, I could be needed in more straightforward ways." The explanation offered insight I hadn't considered, that Dad's apparent favoritism toward Amanda might have stemmed partly from his own insecurities and unresolved grief. It didn't excuse years of imbalanced treatment, but it provided context I'd been missing. "So what happens now?" I asked after a moment. Dad straightened his shoulders, seeming to prepare himself. "I've spoken with my financial advisor. I can't repay the full amount immediately, but I've developed a payment plan." He removed an envelope from his jacket. "This contains the first installment of $5,000, along with a signed agreement for monthly payments of $2,000 until the debt is cleared, with the agreed-upon interest." The concrete action, more than words of apology, indicated genuine intent to address the situation. I accepted the envelope, placing it on the coffee table without opening it. "And what about Jasmine?" I asked, this issue equally important to the financial one. Dad's expression reflected genuine remorse. "I'd like to apologize to her personally if she's willing to hear it. What I said was wrong on every level. Jasmine has clearly been good for you. Anyone with eyes can see how happy you've been since meeting her. My comments reflected prejudices I'm ashamed of, not any valid concern about your relationship." I studied him, looking for signs of insincerity but finding none. "That's for Jasmine to decide. I won't pressure her either way." Dad nodded in acceptance. "Fair enough. And your wedding plans, Margaret and Amanda may choose not to attend given the tension, but I'd like to be there if you'll have me." The request carried significant weight. Having Dad at our wedding would signal some level of reconciliation, but also risked bringing tension to an occasion meant for celebration. "I need to discuss that with Jasmine," I replied honestly. "If you do attend it, would be with the clear understanding that this is our day and any prejudice or discomfort on your part stays completely hidden." "Of course," Dad agreed quickly. "I wouldn't want to detract from your celebration in any way." We talked for another hour, the conversation moving between practical matters of repayment and deeper issues of our relationship. No single discussion could repair years of accumulated hurt, but it represented a beginning, an acknowledgement of problems, and willingness to address them directly rather than through avoidance or pretense. When Dad finally left, I felt emotionally drained but lighter somehow. The confrontation I'd feared had initiated a process of potential healing, though I harbored no illusions about quick or complete restoration. Some damage had been done that might never fully repair. That evening, I shared everything with Jasmine, who listened with her characteristic blend of emotional insight and practical analysis. "Do you believe he's sincere?" she asked after I'd recounted the conversation. "I think so," I answered carefully. "More importantly, he's taking concrete action with the repayment plan. Words matter less than behavior at this point." Jasmine nodded in agreement. "About the wedding, if you want him there, I support that. My family has taught me that reconciliation doesn't require forgetting past hurts, just a willingness to create space for new patterns." Her generosity of spirit, even towards someone who had disrespected her, reinforced why I loved her so deeply. "Are you willing to hear his apology?" "Yes," she decided, after consideration. Not for his benefit, but because I believe in giving people the opportunity to do better when they recognize their mistakes. The months leading to our wedding saw a gradual rebuilding of my relationship with Dad. True to his word, the monthly payments arrived on time, each one reinforcing his commitment to making amends. His interactions with Jasmine evolved from awkward politeness to genuine interest in her research and family background. Margaret and Amanda remained distant, declining the wedding invitation as expected. But Dad's choice to attend independently marked a significant shift in family dynamics. Our wedding in Puerto Rico exceeded our hopes. An intimate gathering of 40 guests, including close friends, Jasmine's family, and select relatives from my side, including Aunt Patricia and her family. The beachfront ceremony with Jasmine's grandmother seated prominently in the front row captured everything we valued: authenticity, meaningful connection, and celebration of our shared future. Dad attended alone, maintaining a respectful presence throughout the weekend. During the reception, I noticed him approaching Jasmine while I was speaking with Tyler. "Your husband is the best man I know," I overheard him tell her. "And I can see why he chose you. Thank you for bringing such joy into his life." The simple, sincere acknowledgement represented more healing than elaborate apologies could have achieved. Later, when Jasmine shared the interaction with me, we both recognized it as a small but meaningful step toward whatever our future relationship with Dad might become. The first repayment check after our wedding arrived with a note: "For your future home together." We decided to follow Dad's suggestion, establishing a dedicated savings account for eventually purchasing a house, transforming money that had once represented family obligation into an investment in our chosen family's future. Standing now on our balcony, watching Jasmine review listings for houses we might consider, I reflect on the lessons learned through this difficult journey. Setting boundaries with family isn't selfish, but necessary for healthy relationships. Blood connection doesn't guarantee unconditional support or respect. Creating chosen family can provide the acceptance and recognition that birth family sometimes fails to offer. Forgiveness is possible without forgetting or erasing consequences. Standing firm on your values ultimately attracts people who share and respect those values. The family you build can help heal wounds inflicted by the family you were born into. The relationship with Dad remains a work in progress, neither fully healed nor permanently damaged, but evolving into something more honest than before. With Margaret and Amanda, minimal contact has proven the healthiest option for now. Most importantly, the painful experience clarified my priorities and values just as Jasmine and I begin building our life together. "What do you think about this one?" Jasmine asks, showing me a listing for a charming colonial with a garden spacious enough for future children to play. "I like it," I reply, seeing not just the house, but the possibilities it represents. "Let's schedule a viewing." As we turn our attention to this shared future, I realize that sometimes life's most painful betrayals can ultimately guide us toward where we truly belong. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision about setting boundaries with family members? I'd love to hear how you handled similar situations in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. And if you know someone struggling with family dynamics or financial boundaries, consider sharing this video. Sometimes knowing others have faced similar challenges can provide the courage needed to address difficult situations. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's often the first step toward building the life you deserve.